council chamber on Velthor Prime looked like a crystal palace floating in space. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated areas, each zone modified for their specific needs. The insectoid krill needed high heat and dry air. The gaseous veneth required containment fields. The reptilian Dramoth preferred dim lighting and stone purchase. In the center of it all stood Ambassador Minho Park, a human, wearing a simple gray suit that looked plain compared to the elaborate forms around him. Minho cleared his throat and activated the translation device on his collar. His words would be converted into chemical signals, light patterns, sound waves, and dozens of other communication methods simultaneously. Every species in the room would understand him perfectly. Humans had built this translation network 200 years ago, but nobody remembered that anymore. Honored delegates, Minho began, his voice steady. I stand before you today to deliver a formal declaration from the United Human Colonies. Effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing from all galactic institutions, treaties, and cooperative ventures. All human personnel will return to human-controlled space within the next 30 days. Silence fell across the chamber. Then the krill high speaker, creature named Tikathra, with mandibles that clicked when she spoke, rose from her heated platform. This is absurd. You cannot simply leave. Our contracts allow for termination with 30 days' notice, Minho interrupted calmly. We are exercising that right. All human workers, engineers, doctors, teachers, and administrators will be departing their current posts. A Veneth coordinator named Wismora, visible as a swirling purple cloud in his containment field, pulsed with agitation. You are attempting to negotiate for better terms. This is a transparent bluff. Minho shook his head. This is not a negotiation. This is a departure. Humanity has served the galactic community for 3 centuries. We have maintained your infrastructure, healed your sick, educated your young, and connected your worlds. In return, we have been treated as useful but ultimately replaceable servants. The recent incident at Tanis Station has shown us that we will never be seen as equals here. The chamber erupted in multiple languages at once. Clicks, whistles, chemical sprays, and color changes filled the air. Minho stood quietly, waiting for the chaos to settle. Near the back of the chamber, a young Dromoth scientist named Kessex watched the human ambassador with growing concern. Kessex had worked with human engineers for 5 years on the Nexus Gate project. He knew something the others did not. Tikathra's voice cut through the noise. The Tanis Station matter was investigated thoroughly. 4,000 human workers died due to a structural failure. These things happen in space construction. It was deemed an acceptable loss, given the size of the project. Acceptable to whom? Minho asked quietly. Not to the families who lost their loved ones. Not to the human communities who buried their dead. And certainly not acceptable when the investigation revealed that the structural failure occurred because Krill supervisors ignored 17 separate safety warnings issued by human engineers. Warnings that were dismissed because humans were considered overcautious and inconvenient. You are being emotional, Tikathra said dismissively. Space construction involves risk. Your species agreed to those risks. We agreed to reasonable risks, Minho replied. Not to negligence. Not to being treated as expendable. When we asked for better safety protocols, we were denied. When we requested representation on the Safety Council, we were told humans did not have sufficient standing. When we proposed memorial services for the victims, we were informed that work must continue without delays. So yes, Tikathra, we are being emotional. We are also being final. Humanity is leaving. Cross-human-controlled space, the withdrawal had already begun. Chief Engineer Daeon Choi stood in the main control room of Nexus Gate Station 47. It's located in the neutral zone between Krill and Veneth territories. Around her, 30 human technicians worked at their stations, monitoring the massive gate that allowed ships to jump across light years in seconds. The gate was one of 2,000 similar structures scattered across the galaxy, and humans maintained 90% of them. Status report, Daeon called out. All systems running at optimal, replied her deputy, Taijin Song. The shift change is in 6 hours. The Krill replacement team will arrive then. Dayon pulled up the specifications for the gate on her holographic display. The machine was a marvel of engineering, combining technologies from 7 different species into one functional system. But the real trick was not in building the gates. It was in maintaining them. The components degraded in unpredictable ways. The calibrations needed constant adjustment. The interfaces between different alien technologies required someone who understood all of them. Have they completed their training? Dayon asked. Taijin hesitated. They attended the basic orientation course. 4 days of instruction. 4 days. Dayon laughed bitterly. I trained for 3 years before I was certified to work on these gates, and I had mentors for another 2 years after that. They seemed confident, Taijin offered weakly. Of course they did. Dayon began shutting down her workstation. They think this is just button pushing. They do not understand that every gate is slightly different, that the quantum resonance varies based on local gravitational fields, that you need to feel when something is wrong before the sensors even register it. She paused, but they will learn, eventually. Captain Jiwan Lee stood on the bridge of the colony ship Perseverance, watching the coordinates count down on the main display. Her ship carried 15,000 humans, all leaving positions across the Dromoth Confederation. Teachers, medical staff, agricultural specialists, and infrastructure workers. They had packed their belongings and said quiet goodbyes to alien colleagues who mostly seemed confused by the sudden departures. Jump calculations complete, her navigator announced. We are ready to return to human space. Take us home, Juan ordered. The Perseverance slipped into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind a dozen worlds that would wake up tomorrow without the humans they had taken for granted. Jiwan thought about the school where she had taught xenobiology for 8 years. The Dromoth administrators had been polite when she resigned, but they seemed to think she was overreacting. Surely the Tanis incident was not that significant, her supervisor had said. Accidents happen. Why must you leave? Jiwan had not bothered explaining. How could she make them understand? Humans had been dying in easily preventable accidents for decades, and the response was always the same. Investigations that blamed the victims? Safety recommendations ignored because they were inconvenient or expensive. Memorial services considered a waste of time. And through it all, humans had continued working, believing that if they just proved their worth, they would eventually be respected. Tanis Station had shattered that illusion. 4,000 dead because alien supervisors could not be bothered to listen. And the Galactic Council had called it acceptable. Back on Velthara Prime, the council session was ending badly. Minho had delivered his final statement and was preparing to leave. Tikethro was still sputtering about breach of contract. Wismara insisted this would damage humanity's reputation forever. Other species voiced various complaints, threats, and dismissals. Only Kesix approached Minho as the human ambassador walked toward the exit. Ambassador Park, a moment, please. Minho stopped and turned. Scientist Kesix. How can I help you? You understand what will happen? Kesix said quietly. The gates will fail. The medical systems will collapse. The trade networks will fracture. Millions will die. I know, Minho said. His face was sad but determined. And I grieve for that future. But humanity has tried every other option. We have asked for respect. We have demonstrated our value. We have negotiated and compromised. Nothing changed. Now the galaxy will learn what we provided. Perhaps then they will understand what they lost. And if they do not, Kesix asked, if they simply hate you for this? Minho was quiet for a moment. Then at least our dead will know that we valued their lives, even if nobody else did. Goodbye, Scientist Kesix. I hope we meet again under better circumstances. As Minho left the chamber, Strategic Coordinator Han Kim was already organizing the final evacuations from the most remote human outposts. Within 30 days, every human would be gone from galactic space, and then the galaxy would discover what happens when the invisible workers finally walk away. The first ship went missing on day 33, a krill cargo vessel carrying grain from the agricultural world of Demoris, 3 to the industrial colony of Forge. Prime entered Nexus Gate 72 and never emerged on the other side. Search teams found it 3 weeks later, drifting in deep space, 8,000 light-years from its intended destination. The crew had survived on emergency rations. Half the cargo had spoiled. The Krill authorities blamed the gate malfunction on sabotage. They accused the departing human workers of deliberately damaging the systems. But when Krill engineers examined the gate, they found no evidence of tampering. The gate had simply drifted out of alignment by 0.03 degrees. Such a tiny deviation should not have mattered, but it did. The quantum calculations that guided ships through folded space required absolute precision. At Nexus Gate Station 47, the replacement Krill team that had taken over from Daean Choi and her crew struggled with their first major crisis. The gate's harmonic resonance was fluctuating in ways their training had not covered. Supervisor KRTAS stared at the cascading error messages on the control panel, trying to remember what the departing humans had said during the brief handover. "Recalibrate the quantum field emitters," one of his technicians suggested. "We recalibrated them yesterday," Kruthus replied irritably. "The readings were perfect." "Then why are they showing instability now?" Kruthus did not know. The humans had tried to explain something about local gravitational variations and real-time adjustments, but it had seemed like overcomplicated nonsense at the time. Surely the automated systems could handle such minor details. He pressed the reset button, hoping the problem would resolve itself. The error messages disappeared. The gate showed green status indicators. He reported the incident as a minor technical glitch, already resolved. 3 days later, another ship disappeared. On the water world of Aquanus 7. Dr. Mireille Kwan watched the evacuation shuttle lift off into the pale blue sky. She was the last human doctor leaving the planet, which was home to the aquatic species called the Drellans. She had spent 12 years here, treating everything from parasite infections to reproductive complications. The Drellans breathed water and had biochemistry vastly different from any other known species. Human doctors had been the only ones who could bridge the gap between Drellan biology and the medical technologies of other species. The head of the Aquanus Medical Council, a Veneth physician named Shuvant, had assured her that everything would be fine. "We have doctors from 6 different species," Shuvant had said. "We do not need humans specifically," Irene had tried to explain. The Veneth were gaseous beings whose medicine focused on chemical balance and energy flow. They had no concept of organs or blood. The Krill medical tradition centered on exoskeleton maintenance and molting assistance. The Dromoth understood reptilian biology, but struggled with fully aquatic species. None of them had experience treating Drellans, and none of them had shown much interest in learning. "Hope you were right," Mireille had replied. "I truly do." 6 weeks after Mireille departed, a plague broke out in the southern Drellan cities. It started with respiratory difficulty, then spread to neurological symptoms. The Veneth doctors tried treating it as a chemical imbalance. The Krill physicians prescribed exoskeleton strengthening compounds. The Dromoth specialists suggested thermal regulation therapy. Nothing worked. The disease spread faster, as confused doctors applied treatments that made the symptoms worse. Within a month, 12 million Drellans were dead. The survivors flooded the planetary communication networks with desperate pleas for help. But none of the responding species understood Drellan biology well enough to develop effective treatments. The humans who might have saved them were gone. Guan Li sat in her office on Sanctuary Station, humanity's new capital in the outer reaches of the galaxy, reading the reports coming in from across galactic space. The news networks carried story after story of systems failing, infrastructure collapsing, and crises multiplying. She felt sick reading about the deaths on Aquanus 7. But she also felt a cold anger. "They were warned," she said to her first officer, Kung Sunam, who stood nearby reviewing similar reports.
"Yes."
"They were," Kung Su agreed. Ambassador Park told them explicitly what would happen. And they ignored him. Juan pulled up another report. The Dromoth Education Collective is reporting that their school systems are in chaos. Apparently, human teachers were the only ones capable of creating lesson plans that worked for multiple species in mixed classrooms. And the Krill industrial zones are experiencing massive productivity drops, Kung Su added. Turns out, Humans were doing most of the actual coordination between different worker species. Without that coordination, everyone just works on their own tasks with no synchronization. The reports kept coming. Food distribution networks breaking down because humans had managed the complex logistics. Research projects stalling because human. Scientists had been the ones facilitating communication between specialists from different worlds. Even simple things like building. Maintenance becoming problematic because human. Technicians had understood how to work with the hodgepodge of technologies that most galactic structures contained. The galaxy had not just employed humans, it had depended on them completely without ever realizing it. On Velthera Prime, the Galactic Council attempted to respond to the growing crisis. Emergency sessions were called daily, but they quickly devolved into arguments. The Krill blamed the Veneth for the gate failures, claiming they had cheaply made components. The Veneth accused the Dromoth of hoarding medical supplies during the Aquinas Plague. The Dromoth insisted that the Krill had stolen their educational methodologies without payment. Tekethra found herself struggling to maintain order during sessions. The Council Chamber's translation system kept malfunctioning, causing delegates to misunderstand each other. Arguments that should have taken minutes to resolve stretched into hours of confusion. Finally, in frustration, Tekethra called a recess and summoned the station's technical staff. "Fix the translation network immediately," she ordered. The Krill technician examined the system and looked uncomfortable. "Hi, Speaker. This network was maintained by human specialists. We do not have anyone trained in cross-species linguistic programming." "Then learn." Tekethra's mandibles clicked in agitation. "Yes, Hi, Speaker. It will take approximately 18 months to train someone properly." Tekethra stared at him. 18 months? The humans who maintained this system had specialized training that combined linguistics, computer science, and xenobiology. It is a rare skill set. After the technician left, Tekethra sat alone in the empty council chamber. For the first time, she began to understand what Ambassador Minho had tried to tell them. Humans had not just been workers. They had been the only species with the flexibility and adaptability to make the diverse galaxy function as a unified civilization. The trade routes were the next thing to collapse. A Dromoth merchant named Vesic tried to negotiate a contract with a Krill supplier for industrial components. What should have been a simple transaction turned into a nightmare. The Dromoth legal system emphasized honor and verbal agreements. The Krill system required detailed written contracts with specific technical specifications. Neither side could understand what the other considered binding or important. After 3 weeks of failed negotiations, both sides gave up in frustration. Similar breakdowns happened across thousands of trade relationships. The galactic economy, which had grown steadily for centuries, went into freefall. Unemployment soared. Supply chains broke. Worlds that had specialized in single industries found themselves unable to trade their products for necessities. A delegation of desperate alien officials arrived at Sanctuary Station, demanding to speak with human leadership. They were received politely, but firmly, by Ambassador Minho, who had anticipated their arrival. The delegation's spokesman, a Veneth administrator named Krosvin, pulsed angrily in his containment suit. "You must resume services immediately. The galaxy is collapsing into chaos." "Then I suggest you fix it," Minho replied calmly. "We cannot. The systems are too complex. We need human expertise. You needed human expertise 3 months ago too, but you called us overcautious and expendable. That was a mistake." Krosvin's gases swirled frantically. "We acknowledge that now. But people are dying. Surely you cannot simply stand by and watch." Minho's expression remained neutral. "People were dying at Tana Station, and your council called it acceptable. People have been dying in preventable accidents for decades, and you did nothing. Now you want us to save you because suddenly the deaths affect you personally. What do you want?" Krosvin demanded. "Credits. Territory. Name your price. You cannot purchase what you threw away. You had our loyalty, our dedication, and our expertise. You had them freely given in the spirit of cooperation. You squandered all of that through negligence and contempt. Now you have nothing." The delegation left empty-handed and furious. They reported back to their respective governments that humanity was holding the galaxy hostage, demanding impossible concessions. The truth was simpler and more painful. Humanity was not demanding anything. They were just gone, back on Sanctuary Station. Strategic Coordinator Hyun Kim met with the other human leaders to discuss the situation. The reports from galactic space were horrifying. The death toll was climbing daily, and yet they all knew that returning now, without fundamental changes, would simply reset the cycle of exploitation. "How long do we wait?" Captain Giwan asked. "Until they understand," Minho replied. "Until they truly understand what they lost and why they lost it." The Nexus Gate network failed completely on day 147. Not all at once, but in a cascading collapse that took 6 hours to complete. Gates across the galaxy began destabilizing simultaneously as minor calibration errors compounded each other. Ships entering the gates emerged in random locations, if they emerged at all. 3 vessels materialized inside asteroid fields and were. "Every day at Tanis Station, our people died too," Dayon replied. "And the galaxy did nothing." The debate continued. With no easy answers and the weight of millions of lives hanging in the balance, the referendum took 3 weeks to complete. Every human colony, station, and settlement voted on whether humanity should offer assistance to the dying galaxy. Strategic Coordinator Hyun Kim watched the results come in from his office on Sanctuary Station, knowing that whatever the outcome, it would define humanity's future for generations. The debate had been fierce across human space. Some argued that compassion demanded immediate action regardless of past wrongs. Others insisted that returning without fundamental changes would dishonor everyone who had died at Tanis Station. Still others wanted nothing to do with the aliens who had exploited them for centuries. Captain Juan Lee made one of the most impassioned speeches during the public forums. Her transmission was broadcast to every human settlement. "I understand the anger," she said, standing on the bridge of the Perseverance. "I feel it too. But I also remember why we came to the galaxy in the first place. Not for profit or power, but because we believed we could help build something better. The aliens failed us. They treated us badly. But if we let millions die when we have the power to save them, then we become something worse than them. We become people who watch suffering and do nothing." Engineer Dayan Choi gave a very different speech. "We are not talking about letting people die," she argued from her workshop on Sanctuary Station. "We are talking about whether we enable a system that killed our own people through negligence. If we return without changes, without guarantees, without justice, then Tanis Station meant nothing. Those 4,000 deaths become just another acceptable loss. I cannot accept that. I will not accept that." The vote was incredibly close. 51% in favor of offering limited humanitarian assistance. 49% against. The margin was so narrow that some called for a revote. But Ambassador Minho Park stood before the assembled human leadership and declared the result final. "We will help," he announced. "But on our terms. And our terms are non-negotiable." Minho spent the next week drafting the document that would become known as the Sanctuary Accords. It was not a request or a proposal. It was a statement of conditions that the galaxy would have to accept if they wanted humanity's help. The core demands were simple, but revolutionary. First, humanity would receive 3 permanent seats on any reconstituted galactic council with full veto power. Second, all species would be considered legally equal across all territories, with standardized protections and rights. Third, mandatory safety and labor standards would be enforced for all workers regardless of species. Fourth, financial reparations would be paid to the families of everyone who died at Tanis Station. Fifth, a memorial would be built and maintained in perpetuity to honor those who had been called acceptable losses. When the Sanctuary Accords were transmitted to galactic space, the reactions varied wildly. The Krill Empire, now fractured and desperate, rejected them immediately. High Speaker Takithra called the demands an insult to sovereign species and vowed that the Krill would never accept human overlordship. The Veneth Coordination took a more pragmatic view. Coordinator Crosvin, who had led one of the earlier delegations to Sanctuary Station, argued that the terms were harsh but survivable. "We can accept temporary humiliation or face permanent extinction," he told his fellow Veneth leaders. The choice is obvious. The Dromoth Confederation split into two factions. The traditionalists refused to grant humans equal status, viewing it as a betrayal of Dromoth's superiority. The pragmatists, led by scientist Kisex, argued that the old ideas of superiority had led them to disaster. "We are not superior to anyone," Kessex told the Confederation Assembly. "We are a dying civilization clinging to pride while our people starve. Accept the terms or accept death." One by one, out of desperation rather than conviction, species began signing the Sanctuary Accords. The Veneth signed first, followed by the Dromoth Pragmatist faction, and smaller species who had been hit hardest by the collapse. The Krill held out longest, but when a plague outbreak killed 15 million of their citizens and human doctors refused to help without the accords being signed, even Tekethra's resistance crumbled. 6 months after the withdrawal began, the galaxy had formally agreed to humanity's terms. But accepting the terms and implementing them were very different things. Engineer Dayan Choi returned to Nexus Gate Station 47 with a team of 50 human technicians and 100 alien apprentices from various species. The gate was in terrible condition. The Krill team that had replaced her had managed to keep it running through sheer determination, but barely. Error reports filled thousands of pages. The harmonics were dangerously unstable. 3 more ships had been lost in the months since she left. Supervisor KRTAS, the Krill who had taken over her position, greeted her with obvious relief mixed with resentment. "You have come to gloat?" he asked, his mandibles clicking. No, Dayan replied simply. "I came to fix what is broken, and to teach, if you are willing to learn. I am not your student. I am a certified engineer." Dayan pulled up the gate's diagnostic readouts on her tablet and showed them to KRTAs. "Tell me what this harmonic fluctuation means." He studied the display, his confidence fading. "The quantum field is unstable." "Why is it unstable?" "I do not know. It is unstable because there is a gravitational anomaly point to light years from this station, and its position shifts slightly every few weeks. The compensation algorithms need to be adjusted constantly based on real-time gravitational mapping. This was in the training materials we provided. We did not have time to study all the materials," KRTAs admitted quietly. "Then make time now," Dayan said, not unkindly. "Because I am not here to do your job for you. I am here to teach you how to do it properly. But you need to actually learn." It was the same story across the galaxy. Human specialists returned to critical positions, but this time as teachers and supervisors rather than laborers. The dynamic was completely different. Alien workers who had once given orders now took instruction. Species that had dismissed human expertise now studied it carefully. Not everyone accepted the new order gracefully. A faction of Krill military officers, calling themselves the Purity Movement, viewed the Sanctuary Accords as a surrender to foreign occupation. Their leader, Admiral Venskla, believed that humanity had orchestrated the entire crisis to seize power. "They sabotaged the gates," he told his followers in secret meetings. "They caused the plagues. They created chaos to make themselves necessary. And now they rule over us while pretending to be saviors." The Purity Movement began attacking human vessels and settlements in Krill space. Their raids were small at first, testing human defenses. They expected to find humans vulnerable, relying on alien protection. They were wrong. Captain Jiwon Lee was commanding a convoy of medical supply ships to a plague-affected Krill world when 3 Purity Movement warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in their path. The lead ship transmitted a message demanding the humans surrender their vessels and leave Krill space immediately. "Negative," Guan responded calmly. "We are on a humanitarian mission authorized under the Sanctuary Accords. Stand down and let us pass. We do not recognize human authority," Admiral Venska replied. "Surrender or be destroyed." Guan switched her ship's defensive systems from standby to active. Around her, the other ships in the convoy did the same. The Krill warships detected the power spike and prepared to attack, expecting a brief fight against poorly armed transport vessels. What happened next shocked them. The human ships accelerated to speeds the Krill sensors said were impossible. Their weapons struck with precision that suggested targeting systems decades more advanced than anything the Krill possessed. Within 3 minutes, all 3 Purity movement warships were disabled, their engines offline, and weapons neutralized. Not destroyed, not damaged beyond repair, but completely helpless. Juan opened a channel to the disabled vessels. Admiral Venskva, your ships will be towed to the nearest Krill military station and turned over to your government. Your crews are unharmed. Consider this a demonstration. Humanity did not spend the last 3 months sitting idle. We advanced. We improved. We built. We are not returning to the galaxy as servants or victims. We are returning as equals. Those who cannot accept this will face consequences. The Purity movement attempted more attacks over the following weeks. Both ended the same way. Word spread quickly through military channels. Humanity had changed during their withdrawal. The species that had been considered useful but unremarkable now commanded technology and capabilities that rivaled or exceeded the greatest powers in the galaxy. The first reformed Galactic Council convened on a newly constructed neutral station. The old Velthera Prime facility had been deemed too symbolic of the failed previous council. This new station, called Unity 1, is designed with input from all species, including humans. Ambassador Minho Park took his seat among the permanent members. Joined by Strategic Coordinator Hyun Kim and Scientist Sora Han, who had been elected to represent humanity's interests. Around them sat representatives from 47 species, all of them there under the terms of the Sanctuary Accords. The first session was chaotic, but productively so. Species that had barely spoken to each other for years were forced to work together to address the ongoing crises. Human mediators facilitated discussions, but they did not dominate them. The goal was not human rule, but functional cooperation. Takithra, still serving as the Krill representative despite her initial opposition to the Accords, found herself working alongside Minho to resolve a trade dispute between Krill and Dreymoth merchants. The conversation was awkward at first. "Do you enjoy this?" she asked him during a break in negotiations. "Watching us struggle with what you made look easy?" "No," Minho said honestly. "I take no pleasure in your difficulties, but I hope you are learning something valuable." "What am I supposed to learn?" "That the work humans did was skilled, important, and difficult. That it deserved respect. That we were never just servants or laborers, but partners in building something greater than any single species could achieve alone." Takithra was quiet for a long moment. "At Tana Station, when I called those deaths acceptable, I believed it. I thought that was just the cost of ambitious projects. I did not understand that every one of those deaths represented a choice to ignore warnings, a choice to value speed over safety, a choice to treat human lives as less important than our convenience. Do you understand now?" "Yes," she said quietly. "Too late for those who died, but yes, I understand now." The galaxy was being rebuilt, slowly and painfully, on new foundations. But the rebuilding had only just begun. 5 years after humanity walked away, the galaxy looked very different. The Nexus Gate network was functioning again, though it had taken 3 years of intensive work to restore it fully. The rebuilt gates were stronger and more reliable than before, maintained by mixed teams of humans and aliens working as genuine partners. The plague worlds had been healed, though the scars remained. Trade routes operated smoothly again, coordinated by specialists from multiple species who had learned to communicate effectively. But the most profound changes were not in the infrastructure. They were in how the galaxy thought about itself. Dr. Borayun stood before a lecture hall filled with students from 17 different species. She was teaching at the newly established Institute of Galactic Cooperation, built on a neutral world chosen specifically because it had no dominant species. The university was revolutionary in its design. Every classroom could accommodate multiple biologies. Every course was taught with the assumption that students from radically different backgrounds would need to learn together. Today we will discuss the concept of invisible labor, Bora said, projecting images onto the screens that surrounded the circular classroom. For centuries, certain types of work were considered unimportant or simple, even though they were essential to civilization's functioning. Can anyone give me an example? A young Krill student named Tikshore raised her foreleg. Maintenance work. Before the withdrawal, we thought maintaining systems was easy. Just follow procedures. But now I know it requires deep understanding and constant adaptation. Exactly, Bora said. And why did we not recognize this before? A Dromath student named Vassal spoke up. Because it worked so smoothly. When something works well, we assume it is easy. We only recognize difficulty when things fail. Very good. This is a central problem in any complex society. The better someone does their job, the less visible that job becomes. This is what happened with humanity in the old galactic civilization. We were so good at connecting different species and maintaining shared systems that everyone forgot we were doing it at all. Bora noticed a Veneth student pulsing with what she had learned to recognize as shame. Yes, Kozvim. You have a question? Professor Yoon, I must ask something difficult. My parents were administrators during the old council. They voted to classify the Tanis Station deaths as acceptable losses. How do I reconcile that? How do I learn from humans when my family harmed yours? The classroom went silent. This was the uncomfortable question that hung over every interaction between humans and the species who had dismissed them. Bora took a moment before responding. Your parents made a terrible decision, she said carefully. But they made it within a system that taught them to make such decisions. A system that valued efficiency over lives, productivity over people. You are here learning to build a different system. That is how you reconcile it. Not by forgetting what happened, but by ensuring it never happens again. Is that enough? Kozvim asked. Can learning be enough? I do not know, Bora admitted honestly. But it is a start. On Tanis Station, now fully rebuilt and operational, a memorial stood in the central plaza. It was a simple design, a wall of polished stone engraved with 4,000 names. Families of the dead had worked with artists to create something that honored their loved ones without being too painful to visit. Fresh flowers appeared at the memorial every day, left by workers from dozens of different species who understood what the names represented. Ambassador Minho Park stood before the memorial with his old colleagues. Engineer Daeon Choi was there, along with Captain Ji-Won Lee and Strategic Coordinator Hyun Kim. They had gathered for the 5th anniversary of the withdrawal, a day that had become an unofficial holiday across human space. Do you think they would be satisfied? Daeon asked, gesturing at the names. The people we lost? Would they think what we achieved was worth the cost? I think about that often, Minho said. We did not bring them back. We did not undo their deaths. We just made sure the galaxy remembered them. And changed the galaxy in the process, Hyun added. The Sanctuary Accords, the new council, the safety standards, the equal treatment. Those 4,000 deaths created all of this. That is a heavy burden for the dead to carry, Ashwan said quietly. They stood in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Then a group of alien students approached, led by their professor, a Dromath scientist named Kesix, who had become one of humanity's closest allies. The students wanted to visit the memorial as part of their education. KES-6 approached Minho respectfully. Ambassador Park, I hope we are not intruding. My students are learning about the events that led to the Reformation. I thought they should see this place. You are always welcome here, Minho said. That is why we built it. So everyone would remember. One of the students, a young Krill named Tikshra, studied the names carefully. There are so many, she said softly. I knew the number, 4,000, but seeing all the names makes it real. That is important, Daeon told her. Numbers are abstract. Names are people. Each one of these names was someone with family, friends, hopes, and dreams. They were not acceptable losses. They were never acceptable losses. Tikshra touched the stone gently. I want to be an engineer. Like the humans who tried to warn about the dangers here. I want to be someone who listens to warnings and keeps people safe. And these names did not die for nothing, Daeon said. Later that day, The Reformed Galactic Council held a special session commemorating the 5th anniversary. Representatives from every species spoke about what they had learned from the crisis and the reforms that followed. The speeches varied in quality and sincerity, but even the worst of them acknowledged that fundamental change had occurred. When it was humanity's turn to speak, Minho Park stood before the assembled delegates. He looked older now, the years of stress and responsibility showing in his face, but his voice was still strong. 5 years ago, humanity walked away from galactic civilization, he began. Not out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion. We had tried everything else. We had asked for respect, demonstrated our value, negotiated in good faith. Nothing changed until we left. The galaxy had to collapse before it could be rebuilt properly. He paused, looking around at the diverse species represented in the chamber. Some of you still resent us for that decision. You believe we caused unnecessary suffering? Perhaps you are right. Perhaps there was a better way. But I have yet to hear anyone describe what that better way would have been. We tried everything else first. Tikithra, the Krill representative, rose to respond. Ambassador Park speaks truth. My people resisted the changes longest, and we suffered most for that resistance. But I will say this honestly before the Council. Humanity did not destroy galactic civilization. We destroyed it ourselves through negligence and arrogance. Humanity simply refused to keep holding together something we had broken. It was a remarkable admission from someone who had once called human deaths acceptable. Other representatives nodded in agreement, though some still looked uncomfortable with the acknowledgement. Scientist Keswick stood to address the council. I propose we establish a new tradition. Every year on this date, every world in the galaxy should observe 1 hour of reflection. Time to remember what was lost and why. Time to commit ourselves to never taking anyone's contributions for granted again. Time to honor not just the humans who died, but all the invisible workers in every society who keep civilization functioning. The proposal passed unanimously. It would become known as the Hour of Recognition. The station that had been built as a refuge during the withdrawal had become a thriving city and the center of human culture in galactic space. Young humans grew up knowing they were citizens of a respected species, not merely useful laborers. Strategic Coordinator Haeon Kim, now serving as one of the Human Council representatives, worked in his office reviewing proposals for new joint projects between species. There were plans for a collaborative research station studying exotic physics, a proposal for a multi-species colony on a frontier world, a cultural exchange program between human and Dromoth universities. His assistant, a young human named Taeyong Shin, brought him the latest reports on gate network stability. The systems are running better than ever, Taeyang said. The mixed maintenance teams are actually more effective than human-only crews used to be. Turns out when you combine human adaptability with Krill precision and Dromoth logical analysis, you get something better than any single species could achieve. That was always the promise of galactic civilization, Haeon said. Different species, working together, combining strengths. We just needed to do it as equals. Do you think we will maintain this? Taeyong asked. Or will we eventually slip back into old patterns? Hyun considered the question carefully. I think every generation will have to make the choice, to either value all contributions fairly or to take some people for granted while elevating others. The structures we built help, but structures alone are not enough. The culture has to support them. In a small apartment on Unity 1, the neutral station where the Reformed Council met, a mixed family was having dinner. The parents were a human engineer named Junho Nem and a Dromoth scientist named Vesik. Their children were among the first generation growing up in the Reformed galaxy, seeing cooperation and equality as normal, rather than revolutionary. Their daughter asked her human father about the withdrawal, a topic she had learned about in school. Why did humans leave? Could they not just ask for better treatment? Junho explained patiently. We did ask. For centuries. But sometimes asking is not enough. Sometimes people only understand what they have after they lose it. That seems sad, his daughter said. It is sad, Vesik agreed. My species was among those who did not listen. We thought ourselves superior to humans. We were wrong, and many people died because of our error. Your father's people taught us a hard lesson, but a necessary one. Are you sad about it? The child asked her father. Jun thought about it. I am sad about the deaths, the suffering, the years of conflict. But I am not sad that we demanded to be treated fairly. And I am proud that we built something better. On the observation deck of Sanctuary Station, Ambassador Minho Park stood alone late at night, looking out at the stars. A young cadet named Taiyang Xin found him there and approached hesitantly. Ambassador Park? I hope I am not disturbing you. Not at all, Cadet Xin. Cannot sleep. I was reading about the withdrawal, about Tana Station and everything that followed. I wanted to ask you something. Go ahead. Taiyang struggled to phrase his question. Do you think they understand now? The aliens. Do they understand what we did for them all those years? Minho looked out at the galaxy, at the ships moving between stars, at the distant lights of countless worlds now connected again by human effort and cooperation. Some do, some never will. But that is not why we came back. We came back because when we walk away, the galaxy shatters. And we discovered something important. We do not want to live in a shattered galaxy, even if it treated us poorly. We want to live in one where everyone, human and alien alike, is seen, valued, and heard. He turned to look at the young cadet. You are part of the first generation growing up in the new galaxy. You did not experience the old ways, the exploitation, the dismissiveness. To you, equality and respect are normal. That is what we fought for. That is what those 4,000 people died for, so that your generation would never have to walk away. It is a heavy responsibility, Taiyang said. Yes. Minho agreed, but also a great gift. We gave you a galaxy that knows your worth. Now you must help keep it that way. They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, on thousands of worlds, humans and aliens worked side by side as equals. Not because humanity had conquered anyone, but because they had shown the galaxy. What happens when essential workers are taken for granted? The galaxy had shattered when humans walked away. But in the rebuilding, something stronger had emerged. Not a civilization built on exploitation and invisible labor, but one built on mutual respect and recognition. It was imperfect, still healing from old wounds, still learning new ways of cooperation, but it was better, and that was enough. Outside the viewport, a ship passed by. Carrying human and krill engineers to repair a gate in a distant sector, they would work together, teach each other, learn from each other, not as masters and servants, but as partners, building something greater than either could achieve alone. The stars shone brighter than ever, illuminating a galaxy forever changed by the day humans walked away and the day they chose to return. Not to save their oppressors, but to build something new from the ruins of what had been. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and humanity had ensured that lesson would never be forgotten.